Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Culinary Scene Kitchen here at Roth Living. This is Chef Ben Davis welcoming you to today's ownership experience for Wolf wall ovens. So electrically powered wall and range ovens. If you own a dual fuel range, an induction range, perhaps you own an E or an M series wall oven, this is the class for you to talk about the use and care of these marvelous appliances. So we're so glad that you're able to join us for the next hour or so we can go into the real use and care of these remarkable products. Just a few things before we get started today talking about these appliances. We want to make sure that you know that the link that brought you to today's YouTube live event will also take you back to a recorded version of today's event in the future. So should you need to review anything or you want to refresh your memory on something that gets discussed today, just use that same link. It'll take you straight back to the recorded YouTube version and you can view it again. Also, should you desire to ask a question today, and we really do encourage you to ask questions in today's session, you will need to create an account on YouTube, which will allow you to use the chat feature on the live stream, and you can type your question in. Kelsey is over behind the computer. She'll relay that question to me directly. I'll try to make sure I repeat the question so you know it's your question that's being answered, and then we'll get it answered for you. So by all means, if you have some burning questions, if you've been using the oven and you have some questions that you really need answered and you want to make sure they get answered, I may cover it anyway, but you still want to make that account so you can get those questions answered. And last but not least, in the description below today's event, right down there in all the printed stuff underneath the screen, you will see some links that will take you to some downloads, which I think you might find very helpful should you avail yourself of these. And the first one is going to be a fairly hefty download, but I would recommend that you do it. It is the Use and Care Guide for all Sub-Zero, Wolf, and Cove appliances bound into a single volume. So it's nice to have this. Now you don't need to have a manual for every single one of your appliances in a filing cabinet somewhere or in a cabinet in your kitchen. This puts everything at your fingertips regardless of the number of appliances you own. So if you have a question and you want to check something out, it's right here at the ready. So I would recommend that you make this available to yourself. And the other two items are going to be very specific to today's topic. And that's going to be a brief description, a cheat sheet, if you will, of the convection modes or the different modes in your convection oven, because you all know you have a Wolf electrically powered oven, therefore it is a convection oven. But this is just a list of the different modes, how the heat is generated, and we'll certainly talk about that today, and then the best uses for the individual modes. We could have easily made you an oven with a single mode and a single temperature, bake 350, right? And you might have been able to get away using that, and because a lot of people do. They do everything in the same way, but this gives you a brief description of each individualized mode so you know why you should be using a roast mode to do your pot roast, or maybe you want to do a roasted turkey. Maybe then you need to remember that convection roast is ideal for that. So this is a great download to have at your fingertips until you get very, very accustomed to using your oven. And then last but not least, there's a download there for the internal temperature guide. When using your temperature probe that was included with your oven, you might want to know what's the optimum temperature for medium rare or medium, however you like things prepared. This gives you some temperature equivalents. You certainly can look those things up on the internet, but we just thought we'd provide this for you as well so you have that at your fingertips so that when you're using that probe, you get the best possible results. So let's just make sure you check out those downloads. They're there in the description, and you really want to take advantage of those because I think you'll find them very helpful. So what are we going to do today? We're really going to talk about how does this oven go together, because I really am a firm believer that if you know a little bit about how it works, and you don't have to know all the engineering behind it, but most of it, if you have a good understanding of that, you'll understand why this mode is preferable to another mode for doing a particular cooking process in your kitchen. It's really important to understand where that heat is coming from, where it's coming from, why it's doing that, how the fans are operating, whatever it might be. I think that's going to be really important for you. And then after we talk about that, we'll certainly talk about how those modes operate, some of the unique features of a Wolf convection oven. That's going to be really important, so you can kind of get all those things discussed. And then at the very end of today's session, we'll certainly talk about maintaining and cleaning your oven. That includes not only the self-cleaning mode, because I don't want you to be afraid of that. I want you to use it because it really is a handy tool to have. And then we have some interim or in-between cleaning that you can do if you need to spot clean or very particular items in your oven that need to be cleaned. We have some products that we like to recommend because they work. That's the only reason we recommend them, is because they work, right? We're not here getting a kickback from some large, company that manufactures cleaning supplies. No, we do it because they work for us and we want them to work for you as well. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to cover all of that. If you have a question, again, ask it. Remember as well, if you have some questions perhaps about a Wolf Speed oven, get those questions in today as well. We're not going to cook in it today because we're really going to focus on those convection ovens. But if you have a speed oven, have a question, ask that question. And you guys all know that if you have a Wolf convection steam oven, we have a separate virtual class for that. So just go to the Roth Living website and you can check out the schedule for those virtual classes on the convection steam oven as well to get those questions answered, all right? So let's just start out by talking about how your convection oven goes together. And remember that all the ovens are essentially the same in terms of how they operate. And so when I say all the ovens, I mean if you have a dual fuel range, that oven that's built into that range. If you have an induction range, that oven. If you have an E-series oven, like the one here on the wall behind me, or you have the M-series in all its various models and styles, all of those ovens essentially function the same way internally. There are some very small differences between fan assembly and some of the design features, but really when we're talking about how the oven operates and how you are going to use it, they're the same thing. So we can not having to differentiate between, the M-series only does this and the E-series does that. No, we can talk about them universally. The biggest difference, obviously, is going to be the way that you talk to it, right? So if you have an E-series, like this oven, you're going to use this panels in front on the top to program the oven, to put in the proper cooking mode and temperature and times. Same thing is going to be true if you have the knobs on a Pro Series, M-series. They have the two red or black or stainless steel knobs, or 4 if you have a double oven. So just know that there's just slightly different ways of talking to the oven, of actually interfacing with it. But when we're talking about how they cook, it's going to be all about the same thing, all right? So let's talk about how they go together on the inside so we understand how the heat is generated. So when we talk about a mode and how that mode operates, you're going to be fully aware of what we're talking about. So in every single Wolf convection, electrically powered convection oven, you have 4 different heating elements in the oven. The primary one is the one we've had on every oven we've ever owned, which is either on the floor or beneath the floor, the baking element. That element is the most powerful element that you're going to have in your oven. So when it's on, when it's generating a lot of the power in your oven, you got to be very mindful that nothing goes down here on the floor of the oven. In fact, I would just make it a rule, never put anything on the floor of your oven, whether it's aluminum foil, whether it's a Dutch oven, whether it's a silicone mat. Just don't put anything down there because you don't want to ruin the bottom of your oven. You don't want that foil to stick to it. You don't want to scorch the bottom with a heavy pot. We don't want to disfigure your oven. We want to make sure it stays looking nice. So the first rule is nothing goes on the floor of the oven because that big element underneath the bottom, that's super powerful. We want to avoid hurting the oven. Okay, so that's your first element, your baking element. That's going to be used in a number of different cooking modes, and you have 10 of them in your oven, and the bake element is going to be part of one. And just remember that the way a mode is defined is by where does the heat come from and whether or not the fan system, the convection system, is actually operating during the baking or cooking part of the oven's process. So just remember, mode is heat sources plus or minus fan equal the mode, and each one of those modes is individualized in terms of how much heat comes from the bottom, how much from the top, via a percentage, right? Everything obviously totaling 100%. But the bake element, we want to keep in mind, very powerful, nothing on the floor. The other element we're always very familiar with, it's our broiler element, which is up in the ceiling. We obviously use it exclusively when we're broiling. We're going to talk about broiling a little bit later. We're actually going to broil something today. And we use it occasionally when we're not broiling, when we're doing some roasting or we're using a convection roast mode. That broiler is engaged. And it's important to know that, and that's why that sheet is so important for you to download, because you don't want to put something up too close to the broiler thinking it's not on because you're roasting, and the next thing you know, whatever's up there is burnt because that broiler is on. So we want to be mindful that there are a couple of modes in your oven, roast and convection roast, where that broiler is active even though we're not technically broiling something to use that as a cooking process. So that's your broiler element, again, across the top. And then the other two elements are the ones you can't see, right, without taking the back panel of the wall off. And those are the two elements that encircle the fans behind your oven. Now, you know you have two fans. All Wolf convection ovens have two fans. The lone exception to that would be the 18-inch oven on a 48-inch dual fuel range. That only has a singular fan due to the width of the oven. But you have two fans in every standard size oven. Each one of those fans is accompanied by its own heating element. Those heating elements, when combined, and we always use them together, you can't separate them, the power that is generated by those two elements together is equal to the power beneath the floor. So when we're talking about using a convection mode, right, and we're generating the heat from behind that back wall to completely heat that cavity in the most even, consistent way possible, we can generate just as much heat from back there as we can from down here. So we're not worried that we're not going to get as much heat and we're using convection, but we're going to get all the benefits of convection, as we'll discuss in a couple of minutes, because of the nature of Wolf convection and how it operates. So again, 4 heating elements, 2 convection fans. You remember that in all Wolf convection ovens, we are numbering our rack positions from bottom to top. This becomes so crucial when we talk about rack position and where we're baking or roasting or poaching something, whatever it might be, braising, whatever it might be in the oven. That rack position becomes so critical in its proximity to where the heat is coming from primarily. And we want to make sure that we're not going to put it too close to too much heat where it might burn or scorch something or evaporate something too quickly. But we also don't want to put it in a place where it's not getting the full benefit. So those rack positions are going to be so important when we talk about where and how we cook in this oven. So we always talk from the bottom being the lowest number, 1, and then the top is always 6. So it's very easy to divide your oven into 3 individualized thirds, low, middle, and upper. But when we talk about it in generalities, we can say, okay, for this mode, it's ideal to bake in the middle to lower upper third. If that makes sense to you, that might be racks 3, 4, and 5, right? The very middle of the oven, and then just the very bottom of the top third. So we can talk about generalities like that as well. But it's always important to know that the bottom is always 1 and the top is always 6. Now, in all your ovens, you have 2 types of racks, right? The basic rack that you get with your oven, and you're going to have one of these in every single one of your ovens. It's just a standard oven rack, right, that you can slide in and out. It has these 2 small steel balls at the back, which are the 2 stops so that you can pull out and stop, knowing that either place that you stop the rack coming out of the oven, it's not going to tip out into your lap, right? You can just stop it right there. You just simply align these 2 guides on the back and place the rack wherever you want to put it by just tipping it up gently and then sliding it back in. Very easy, super nice to have that rack when you're doing just very basic preparations. But the other racks, the full extension glide racks, which is, again, something that I really have come to value as I've used these Wolf ovens over time, right? They fully extend on their ball bearing glides, so you can pull it fully out of the oven without any interruption to the back of the rack, and then you can work on it without having to worry, right? It's completely stable, nice stable platform that you're working on. So it's great to have 2 of those extension glide racks in your oven. Now, the problem becomes, though, sometimes you want to rearrange the oven. Maybe you want to remove the racks for cleaning, or perhaps you need to expand the oven cavity because you're going to roast something very large and you need to take some of the racks out so that you can actually fit the food into the oven. So these can be a little more problematic to take in and out because of the rail system on which they sit. But there's some easy tips for just taking them in and out of the oven. First being is when you want to remove or replace or rearrange the oven rack, simply pull it all the way to the end of its rail so it's fully extended. Just grab it by this handle here at the front and then grip the rack at the back. Now, this is still a little warm from using it before, but I'm just going to grip it at the back, lift it up, and then slide them out. And you'll see the rails here, they're a little bit loose, right? So you want to try to make sure that you secure them before you try to replace the rack in the oven. And the best way to do that is simply drop them so they're closed, and then hold them by this small L-shaped tab that's right here at the front. Sorry, I have to turn it around. Right there, that small L-shaped tab. If you hold on to that, now the rack can't open. It's closed in your hands. And all you're going to do is realign these small guides that are underneath the bottom of the rail, right, on the rack position that you would choose to cook in. So in this case, I'm going to put it in rack number 1. I'm going to put it in at a slight angle, and I mean a very slight angle, probably only 10 to 20 degrees angled up. Just grip the handle then and just slip it over so it goes over the top. And you're just going to feel at this point very loose, and don't worry, there's a lot of play in it. Just lift up the front just a little bit, slide it in, and then when it gets to the very end, you're going to feel it kind of jump or hop over like that. You'll hear that little clicking, and then boom, now it's in. So all the racks, regardless of the style, whether it's the traditional style or these full extension glide racks, all of these racks, when fully extended, can support up to 50 pounds of weight without you having to be the slightest bit concerned that it might collapse and not hold that amount of weight. Now, 50 pounds is a lot. You guys probably all know that. Most of us don't ever put 50 pounds on an oven rack. If we do, we're doing something really large or something super heavy. Remember as well that your oven doors can also support up to 50 pounds of weight before there's any chance that there'll be a failure in the hinge system or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. You know, if you've got something heavy in your hands and you've already lifted it off the rack and all of a sudden you need to put it down for some reason, you can still put it onto the oven door. You're not going to damage it. You're not going to hurt the glass. You're not going to hurt the interior of the door by simply leaving it there for a minute or so while you get whatever you need to get done. All right, so just keep that in mind. You can put it on the oven door as well. All right, so again, all goes together just like that. You can see the fans in the back. Those are our 2 fans, the rack system, all of that. Now there again are slightly different interfaces for all the different ovens, right? Everyone has a slightly different interface, right? E-Series, just like this, where you touch the panel to activate, in this case, the upper or lower oven, and then select your mode, your cooking mode, however you would choose to cook in that instance, right? And then the oven will go into preheat. So let's start preheating this oven in order to do something very unique for a Wolf oven. So in this case, I'm going to turn my upper oven on, and now I'm going to select, in this case, my cooking mode. Which mode would I like to cook in? And I'm going to use the convection mode right there. So I'm going to touch convection, and now you see here it's blinking the temperature that we're preset. Every single mode has its own preset temperature, but you can obviously override it and set it wherever you like. So in this case, I'm going to touch convection, and then I'm going to type over here the temperature I want, which is 365 degrees, and then I want to touch enter, and that's going to start my oven. Now, depending on what type of oven you have, you're going to do the same process. You're just going to use either a knob, or perhaps you have just the touch screen on a transitional M series, or perhaps the touch screen on a contemporary M series. If you have a dual fuel oven, you have the 2 knobs. If you have 2 ovens, you have a singular knob on a 30 or 36 inch range. You'll simply use the bezel to select the mode by clicking it into place. Then it will display numbers not only in the touch screen, but also in the little window in the knob itself. That's how you adjust the temperature up or down, by simply toggling to the left or right in order to raise or lower the temperature. And then, should you choose to, you can just touch the start button, which is directly in the center of the touch screen. Or if once you've selected that temperature and hit ready to go on your dual fuel, it will start automatically after a few seconds and just start preheating. So when we talk about preheating, that's a really important topic for a lot of people. They want to know about how long is it going to take, you know, is there certain modes that are faster or slower than that? Let's just first and foremost, let's talk about the fact that when we are preheating in any of the cooking modes in your Wolf oven, the fan system, the fans will operate. They will be circulating the air in order to preheat that oven as quickly as possible so that you can get to going cooking as soon as you want, right? So to 350 degrees in pretty much every mode. There's one exception that takes a little bit longer, and we'll discuss that in a second. But in almost every mode, when we are preheating to 350 degree Fahrenheit, we are talking about a 12 to 15 minute preheat time. That's how long it'll take to preheat. You remember that your oven, your Wolf oven, is not simply preheating the air temperature in the cavity. We're actually preheating the walls that surround the oven so that when you do go to insert the food into the oven, open the door, you're always going to release a little bit of heat and energy into your kitchen, right? That might drop the temperature. However, that's only going to drop the ambient air temperature. The radiant temperature off the walls themselves will not change. It will remain constant. So therefore, if you're using a cooking mode that does not require the fans to be operating, those fans will never resume operation after the oven has reached preheat temperature. So just suffice it to say that in all modes, the fans are operative to preheat your oven as quickly as possible. If you are using a mode that does not engage the fans during the cooking process, then those fans will never resume turning and circulating the air. So just keep that in mind. That's how we heat the oven. What that means is for you that although at temperatures in excess of 400 degrees Fahrenheit, when we're talking about 450 and 475 or even 500 and north of 500, it's going to take a little bit longer to get those walls to that temperature. And particularly when using the stone mode in your oven, you could expect preheat temperatures in excess of 45 minutes in order to get the entire oven cavity to that preheated temperature so it maintains that good, radiant, consistent heat whilst you are baking or roasting or whatever it is you might be using your oven for. So just remember, as you're going to set up your oven, if you know it's going to be a very high temperature, it's a great idea to start preheating that oven a little bit earlier. Or should you choose to, you can always use the connected feature on your oven, which will allow you to connect the operation of your oven with your phone through the Sub-Zero Owners app, the Sub-Zero Wolf and Cove Owners app. You can download that app on either Apple or Android, either one. Download it. You can then connect that phone, your phone, with your appliance. That will allow you, while you are in the home, to actually control your oven with your phone while you're on the same Wi-Fi network there in your home. However, you can also go out of the home by presetting a remote ready status so that when you leave the home, you could then start your oven from a remote location so that when you arrive home, it's ready to go. So if you're interested in that, you can find more information on the connected app, both on the Sub-Zero Wolf and Cove website or just through your manual that came with your oven. You can look it up through that and then you can go ahead and connect it. But it's a kind of a nice feature, especially if you're in the house and you have things to do and you've got a long baking process going on. If you put that phone in your pocket and you're back out around your home, the timer will follow you, the probe temperature will follow you. You can alter things, you can change things on your phone without having to go back to the kitchen to adjust the oven physically. So you can just do it right there from your phone. All right, so it's preheating now. We're going to get that nice and hot up to 365 so we can do some really interesting cooking in there. So when we talk about those modes, right? When we talk about cooking modes, we're talking about, again, where does the heat come from and how does how do the fans operate if they're operating during the cooking process? You have two general categories of modes. One we like to call a still mode, and a still mode means that once the oven is preheated, those fans are completely idle during the cooking process. In other words, it's the heat doing what the heat wants to do, right? It's just going to do its own thing. You're not telling it to move around in circles or go up or down or side to side. It's just doing its thing. So it's just naturally rising from either the bottom or maybe there's a little energy from the top, but it's rising and just doing its own energy, right? That's what it's creating itself. That's a still mode. In your oven, you have a number of still modes. Those modes would be bake is a still mode, roast is a still mode, stone is a still mode, as well as warm and proof. All of those 5 different cooking modes are actual still modes where the fans are not operating in a consistent manner so that we're heating the oven not only with the elements behind the back wall, but also using the fans to circulate the air. So those are the still modes. Your convection modes, where we're not only using the fans to circulate the air, but we're also heating the air using those elements behind the back wall. that equates to a convection mode where we're using a lot of the energy, or most of the energy is coming from behind that back wall, and we're circulating it with the fans. So we're now telling the oven we want the air to move in a very particular manner, because this is how we know is going to cook the best. So that's the two general categories of modes, and your convection modes are convection, convection roast, and dehydrate. So all three of those are convection modes, right? Very important that we recognize those three. And then you have that one other mode in your oven, right? Or two other modes actually. One of them which is a cooking mode, and the other mode which is a cleaning mode. So those other modes you have in the oven, you have the broil mode, obviously, right? Where you're just using just the heat from the broiler to do that lovely kind of replication of outdoor cooking. And also you have the gourmet mode. And the gourmet mode is great because there are days when you're just like, I can't think about how I want to cook something. Maybe my oven knows. So we're going to talk about using that gourmet mode because it chooses what's the best way to do it. If you're feeling unsure, the oven will choose for you. In fact, this chicken that we roasted here today was roasted entirely using the gourmet mode, which just gives you on-screen step-by-step instructions that you can follow through right on screen, and that will roast your whatever, or cook your whatever, bake your pie, your cookies, whatever it might be. It'll just tell you exactly how to do it, rack position, all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the last mode, obviously, is the self-cleaning mode. Obviously, you're just going to use that when you want to self-clean the oven. So let's talk a little bit about convection and the mode convection, because this is one of those things that about a Wolf oven that I think, yeah, oh, we have our first question. Yes, Kelsey. That's a great question. So the question is, what is the mode that I, as a chef and a representative of this great brand, what do I use the most? I would say it's a pretty tight toss-up between convection, just straight convection mode, and probably convection roast, both of those convection modes, because of one, the efficiency at which they cook. I like to not just cook one thing at a time. It's great to be able to cook more than one tray of something or pan of something simultaneously. So I do like to use convection for that. And I'm going to explain a little bit more of that here in just a second. And then convection roast is really that mode when you're in the most impatient mood and you want to cook something just as fast as possible, right? That's when you want to use convection roast, because now you're getting the benefits of everything the oven can do. You've got that amazing convection system, which is driving that air, making your oven more efficient, more uniform, but also you've got heat coming from the top, so now it's browning and crisping much more efficiently than if I weren't using that mode. So I would say it's a close 1v1. I like to use those convection modes, and that may have a lot to do with, when you're in the restaurant business, a lot of times the convection is the only way you cook because you're on the clock all the time, so you're trying to cook things just as quickly as possible, so that convection makes your oven more efficient and therefore it'll cook faster. So convection as a mode, right? We talked about convection, about, that we're generating heat, right? Using those elements behind the back wall. What's unique about all the Wolf convection modes is that in all cases, when using a Wolf convection mode, there is no activity from that element below the floor, right? Because when you think about convection, right? We're thinking about evening the heat in the oven. So side to side, top to bottom, front to back. We want to be able to cook on multiple racks simultaneously, not have to do the old shuffleboard thing where you're taking the top pan and moving it to the middle and spinning everything around and then flipping the bottom one to the top and all those things. We don't want to do that. We want to basically just trust our oven that it's going to bake it uniformly, cook it evenly in roughly the same amount of time it would take to cook a single tray, right? Well, in this case, Wolf convection does that because we don't have to worry about anything too low in the oven because there's no heat coming from down here. All the heat, 100% of the heat in convection mode is coming from behind that back wall. The broiler is off. The baked element is off. So everything's coming from the back. The algorithm that is programmed to run in convection mode runs the fans in such a way that the air in your oven is never, and I mean, underline the word never, never sitting still, always moving. And we're changing the way it moves by changing the way the fans operate. So if you think about, this fan is running and this fan is not, that creates a certain pattern of air. When we reverse that, then we create a different pattern of air when we run them simultaneously. That creates a different pattern of air. If we change the speed of one versus the other, that changes the way the air moves, because that's the idea. We want to make the air do what we want it to do, which is fully engage the entire oven cavity, so I don't have a hot spot in the back left corner or a cold spot in the middle. I want it to be as even as possible. There's another advantage to that Wolff convection, which is that moving air, and this is based on this premise, and it's not a premise, it's actually a fact, moving air that is constantly in motion, never sitting still, not doing what it wants, but doing what we want, that air, that moving air, cannot transfer the flavor of one item onto another, right? So therefore, what that means is if you have a limited oven capacity, if you only have a singular oven in your kitchen, you can now not have to wait to finish baking one thing to cook another thing, because you would be afraid to put them in together because one might taste like the other, and that may not be a flavor combination that you want to have. So what we're going to do as an example of that, we're going to take some beautiful smoky bacon right here, and then I've got some dried cherry and cranberry oatmeal cookies right here. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be bacon and cookies. It could be salmon and apple tart. It could be any of those things. But because that air is constantly moving and never sitting still, these cookies will never taste like the bacon. That apple tart will never taste like the salmon. So you can easily put it in the same oven, provided that both items can tolerate the same heat, right? The same amount of heat, which means you're not going to put something that needs 425 in an oven that with something that requires 250, right? That's too wide a gap. But in the case of the bacon and the cookies, and it really doesn't matter where I place them, because remember, the idea of convection is let's get that even, let's get that oven cooking and baking in an even manner, right? So we can place them wherever we want, knowing that they're going to cook at the same rate because of the way the heat is being generated and how the fans are operating. So convection, right, as a mode, as one of your cooking modes in your oven, is the only mode you will ever use when you are baking two items, whether they are the same or whether they are different, at the same time. You always use convection, because any other mode, right, is going to, even convection roast, right, is going to be dictated by either the way the heat is moving naturally or the engagement of the broiler element, which could then cause anything too high in the oven to cook at a different rate of speed than the rest of the oven. So just remember, convection, multi-rack baking, always, just the end of the story right there. If you've got more than one tray to cook to something, you want to be using convection every single time, because that's going to give you the best results. Remember also with convection, set your timer for a shorter amount of time. You can shave. At the beginning, I would start cutting maybe 20 to 25% off the normal baking time or cooking time of whatever it is you wanted to cook, because the efficiency of the oven due to the fan system is going to make things cook faster. Remember that in a convection mode, food will brown just a little bit quicker, and that's what you want. You want it to get a little bit browner. You want to get that really beautiful even color like we see on the evenness of this roasted chicken, right? That's the idea, right? What convection does is it browns more completely and more evenly. Now, there is one thing that you hear about using convection, and I want to dispel this myth for those of you who are watching today who live at altitude. If you're living here in Colorado, or perhaps you're in Utah, Idaho, Montana, some of the higher parts of Wyoming, if you're in that part of our territory, if you are baking at altitude, and I've used the word baking very intentionally, but you are using convection to do your baking, I do not want you to lower the temperature from what the recipe calls for, right? Leave the temperature at the standard recipe temperature, regardless of where it was written, all those things. Do not lower just because you are using convection. Yes, I know you've heard my oven is more efficient. I can use less energy by lowering the temperature. That's great. The problem is that altitude and atmospheric pressure will take over then, and it could ruin your baked goods. So I do not recommend that you lower the temperature when baking utilizing convection. Leave the temperature the same regardless of how the oven is operating, all right? And again, with convection, any rack in a storm, right? Just pick any rack you want. You can go 135 as I have now. You can go 246. You can change it up. You can wider gaps, narrower gaps. It's really up to you. But with convection, you should get very even baking throughout, regardless of where you place the rack. So that's what convection is all about. And that's really a mode that, as you know, we had the question earlier, that I use all the time because I love the effect I get, the browning effect, the crisping effect, but also the fact that it's cooking faster, and it's going to be it's really going to draw you in when you're using convection. All right? So that's the convection mode. Let's finish up with the other convection modes, because I think you're going to find that these are really great benefits that you get with your Wolf oven. Convection roast, fantastic mode, because in convection roast mode, not only are you getting the fans generating the vast majority of the heat and the elements surrounding those fans, but now you've got the broiler engaged at about 25% of the overall power in the oven. So now you're getting a little extra top browning, a little extra cooking from the top of the oven down, so that when things need to brown a little bit more, like the outside of a chicken, or maybe you're roasting some potatoes, whatever it might be, that's going to give you that extra energy. So that means, though, is that if we're utilizing that broiler, right, to get that extra browning on the top of something, we want to be thinking that we might need to limit ourselves to just a single tray at a time, or a single pan when we are, because the broiler is going to be providing a lot of that heat. So if we stack something in here, whatever's on the bottom is not going to get the full impact of the broiler. So you could kind of play with that a little bit. So let's say you were roasting, you were doing a nice prime rib or something like that, and you roast your prime rib in the bottom. It's already got a nice color on it. It's getting close, and you want to just finish something up. You might be able to slip something up that needs that extra browning by moving it up in the oven and picking up a lot of that broiler heat, so that you get two pans at once. I don't really recommend that, but you could do it. It's just going to require very specific circumstance. You don't want to be stacking two items that are exactly the same in convection roast, because they aren't going to cook the same. Again, if you have two items that you want to get them to cook the same, you go right back to convection and use that as a mode. So again, convection roast, great for all those items that you want to get a nice brown exterior on, a nice crisping, nice caramelization. If you're roasting vegetables, if you love roasted Brussels sprouts or something like that, convection roast is a great mode to use for that, because again, heat from the top, swirling air with hot from the convection. It's an air fryer, folks. That's all it is. So you can set it up using it like your air fryer at home. Get that thing off your counter. Use the one that's in your wall. You paid you paid dearly for this. I would recommend you use it. Get that counter stuff out of there. Yes, I know it takes longer to heat up than your air fryer, but I do think you'll get better results when using it. And if you're going to use it like an air fryer, just use your broiler pan, just like I have here. I've got these zucchini that I've marinated a little bit. I'm going to use these and put them in the lower oven. Now that doesn't have convection, because I'm just going to use the straight broil setting for these and just kind of slowly broil these. And I'm doing a slow broil. I'm not doing the highest temperature. I'm doing a slightly lower temperature broil on these, but I'm putting them in with the handle facing forward on your broiler pan. So if you slide it in, gripping that handle, when that pan touches the back wall of the oven, it's exactly centered underneath your broiler. So we're going to let those go ahead and broil, but just keep that in mind when you're doing convection roast. Just one tray is really the limit in most cases. And just be mindful not too high up in the oven, because it could burn if you get too close. Now, there's one more convection mode. This is going to be the mode, I dare say, you're probably going to use the least of any mode in your oven, and that's the dehydrate mode, right? Unless you're really into, you do a lot of gardening, or perhaps you're a hunter, or, something like that, where you're making a lot of your own beef jerky, or you're preserving your own fruits and vegetables by drying them out and dehydrating them and storing them. You're not going to use this mode very often. But if you are someone who would like to use that, the dehydrate mode is a ton of fun, because you can do a lot of really cool, albeit kind of chefy things with it. But you're going to need a rack very similar to this. Now, you can order these racks from Sub-Zero or from us here at Roth Living if you want, or you can just go out and purchase a rack with a fairly tight weave on it, because you're going to want to lay whatever it is you're dehydrating on this rack. Now, if whatever it is you're dehydrating is really wet, you might want to put it right onto a baking sheet with a little silicone mat or maybe some parchment paper. But in most cases, you can use a rack like this, because it's not dripping on you. Even jerky that's been marinated doesn't really drip that much. But you're going to take this rack, you're going to place it right on the oven rack, and then you're going to set your oven in dehydrate mode. And the unique thing about dehydration mode is that the fans, when they are running, right, never shut off, right? Because if I'm running this oven right now in convection, when I open the door, the fans slowly turn off, right? But in dehydrate mode, that doesn't happen. They just keep on running. They got to blow that hot air across the food that you're trying to dry out. So therefore, because you want to get as much of that moisture out of the oven as possible, you're going to need to prop the oven door with something. You can do something very simple, like just take an old wine cork like I have here, and you simply place it right here in the corner between the frame of the oven and the oven door, and that allows this small gap to open up. But remember, your oven's fans are still going to run, and that's going to allow that excess moisture to escape the oven much more quickly. If you happen to own a M series contemporary oven, which has no handle, right? Therefore, it doesn't operate the same way. You'll need to order this little piece from Sub-Zero. This goes in and holds the oven door open, and then you simply press on it to release it to open the oven door fully. So you'll need this if you have a contemporary M series in order to do some dehydrating. But you know what? If you think you're never going to use dehydrating, I would challenge you someday to try to figure out what you might want to dehydrate. It's a lot of fun. We've dehydrated everything from fresh fermented limes to all sorts of fruits and vegetables. We just have a great time doing it, and it's a great way to preserve stuff that you might otherwise waste or throw away. So it's a great way to utilize things. So play with that dehydration mode. So those are your 3 convection modes, right? Dehydration, convection, roast, and convection. In all cases, the majority of the heat coming from the back of the oven, a little bit of help from the broiler in convection roast mode. And just remember those rules for using convection, right? Don't lower the temperature when you're baking with it. Expect your food to brown a little bit faster, and your food will cook faster as well. Speaking of cooking faster, let's have a check on our cookies, because I can certainly smell the bacon at this point, but it looks like my cookies have gotten just about where I want them, right? I want to just feel that just a little bit of pressure, right? There's just a tiny softness there. The thing about cookies, and you want to remember this, is that there's a lot of heat built up on this pan. So I want to let them sit here on the hot pan, let them cool. I'm going to use my my gas cooktop here as a rack and just let them finish cooking. I don't want to over bake them, because then they lose their nice chew to them. I want to just let them finish cooking with the heat of the pan whilst my bacon is finished cooking here as well. All right, so now let's talk about those still modes, right? The modes you're probably used to using. I mean, I hate to say it, but 90% of the people who own our products, 100% of the time, it's bake 350. Doesn't matter what they're cooking. That's the mode that they're using. So bake is that mode that you're probably most familiar with. Everybody's got bake mode on their oven in most cases, whether it was a Wolf or not. And they kind of understand what bake mode is. They kind of think, okay, well, the heat's probably coming from the bottom somewhere, and I can put stuff sort of in the middle of the oven, and that should cook it really well. And that's pretty much true. But what makes a Wolf oven unique in terms of its bake mode is that we are getting 90% of the heat from that big element underneath the floor, but we're adding 10% heat from the broiler. So a little bit of heat coming from the top. That's not a lot. It's enough to burn delicate things, but it's not a lot. But the most important thing to remember about bake mode is that you want to avoid, and this is when we talk about rack position, right? Those racks in the bottom, position 1, position 2, you don't put food down there when you're using bake mode, because you will burn it. I guarantee, now I sound like Justin Wilson. Yeah, I guarantee you could burn that food if you put it too low in the oven, right? When you're baking. So remember, when you're using bake mode, even for dense, heavy items like a lasagna or something like that, don't put it too low in the oven, because you're going to end up with a scorched bottom and you're going to ruin that item by putting it too low. So keep your oven position for bake mode at 3, 4, and 5. Right there, again, middle third, and then the bottom of the upper third. That's really an ideal position. And always remember that the closer I get to that 10% from the broiler, well, guess what? Little more browning, little more color, because I'm closer to that broiler. It's not super hot up there, but it's enough that if you have something delicate, it's going to brown really nicely. Let me check my zucchini. Looks really nice. They're broiling beautifully. All right, fantastic. So bake mode, other thing to remember about bake mode, right? Single rack, only one pan at a time. You are not baking on multiple ever. right? Because that heat is coming naturally. And if I put two stacked on top of one another, this is going to cook faster than this. And you're going to be frustrated because the last thing you want to do again is the whole switcheroonie, right? So just remember that, you can put multiple items on a single rack. That's fine. Just don't stack them. All right. So again, bake mode goes from 170 degrees to 550 degrees. So you choose the temperature. The oven is just going to, again, provide that gentle, inflating, uplifting heat from the bottom of the oven. Bake mode's cousin, right, if you will, because they share one thing in common, which is they share a single rack cooking mode, and that's roast mode, right? Roast mode, I want you to think of roast mode as sort of that slow cooker way. I'm going to take it nice and low and slow. If convection roast is let's get it cooked quickly, roast mode is kind of like, just let it go. Let it go nice and easy, right? We're still getting the most of our heat from down low. 75% of the heat's coming from that baking element. But we're assuming that if we're roasting something in there, they probably got some moisture in there. Maybe we're making a pot roast. Maybe we're going to do some veal shanks or something like that. We got a lot of moisture down there. So we're not really worried about burning something down there because we've got a lot of water, wine, broth, whatever it might be in that pan down low. So you can cook nice anywhere in the oven except probably too near the top because the other 25% is coming from that broiler. So you're going to get a lot of browning if you open something up to that broiler and it's too close. So what I recommend for people who do roast mode, and let's just check our bacon here. Oh, look at that. It's looking really good. I love cooking bacon in the oven because it cooks so nice and evenly, and I never have to turn it over, right? And that's the beauty of convection as well. That's helping to get a little bit more crispness on the top of our bacon as it cooks in the oven. Oh, and here, let's just pull out our zucchini. Oh, look at those. So those are starting to brown really nicely, and they're just getting just a little bit soft. So we're looking really good. So again, roast mode is that low and slow, long time in the oven, a lot of moisture. I would start off when you're roasting in the roast mode and you've got that something that you want to keep it nice and moist, cover it for the first 2/3 of the baking process or the roasting process. Put a cover on it, a little aluminum foil, maybe it's the lid on your Dutch oven. Keep that moisture in there. Just get it as soft and as moist and tender as possible. Then at the end, uncover, expose it to the broiler, use the broiler to get that browning, to get that flavor development, that caramelization. That's what you really want. So roast mode, great for that low and slow, but again, single rack, because you want to take full advantage of the broiler, right, down on whatever it is you're roasting, right? So it's great for that. Not the best for roasting your vegetables that you like to be nice and crispy and brown on the outside, right? That's better in convection roast, right? Because roast mode is better if you're going to do a slow roasted vegetable. So if you've got some squash, right? Maybe you've got spaghetti squash. We're going to get to the fall here soon enough, and we'll start seeing the hard squashes again, and we'll get into that mode where we want to roast those and get them nice and tender and succulent and moist. That's when we use roast mode for roasting those butternuts, those spaghetti squashes. Maybe we're going to roast some whole beets. Colorado, we grow a lot of beets here. So maybe we want to roast those so they're nice and tender because beets don't ever roast quickly. You need to roast them slowly so they get nice and soft and sweet. That's when you want to do it. So that's what roast mode is all about for that. Quick point, here's a cool tip, right? If you love to bake fresh homemade biscuits, right, I would recommend that instead of using bake mode for that tray of biscuits, use the roast mode because that additional heat from the broiler, that's going to give you a nicer glaze on the top, a little more color on the top of your biscuit. Still going to bake very nice and evenly from below because that heat's coming from below. So it's a great way to bake your biscuits because you get a little more color, and I like that, a little more crispiness on the top of my biscuit when it's baked. So that's what roast mode is all about. Now, in all of these modes, right, you can use your temperature probe, and you got a temperature probe with your oven. So with roast mode, convection roast, bake, all of these, you can easily use your temperature probe. Remember that in all ovens, regardless of the model, the style, the temperature probe input is right here in the upper left corner of the oven, right there. Just plugs in right there, snaps it in. Now remember, you got to use the right probe. Don't use the black one. If you own a convection steam oven, you got a black probe with that. Don't use that in this oven. It'll fit, it just won't work. So that's why we got to use the blue probe. So just remember that for your big oven, it's the color of the interior of your oven is the color of the probe. But when you plug it in, like right here, you're going to see right up here, it's going to show up in the corner, whether it's on your whatever oven you own, if it's on your dual fuel, it'll be right in the touch screen, right? You're going to touch that, and then you're going to be able to adjust your probe temperature right there on the screen. Your probe temperature can go as low as 90 and as high as 210 degrees. We can't make the inside of your food hotter than the boiling point of water without using a pressure cooker. So once you have your probe temperature set and you insert the probe into the food, this will monitor how quickly the food is cooking, and you can watch it rise right there when it's set in that upper left-hand corner. Remember that your probe will not operate your oven. It won't turn the oven off for you when it reaches that temperature. It's simply going to give you an audible alert to tell you, hey, I've reached the temperature that you've requested. You might want to take the food out of the oven. So remember that with your probe. Again, if you have the connected appliance, it'll show up on your phone as well. All right, check our, beautiful. That's what we're looking for, just a little bit of color here. Just about there. Now, I've only got this on the medium setting for the broiler just to cook those up. But you can see how lovely our bacon is cooked. I love that because I get all the nice rendered bacon fat as well. So use your probe in any mode except broil. You cannot broil with the probe in place because it will melt because it's too close to the hot broiler. You can do it in convection roast because that's only 25% of the heat, or roast, it's only 25% of the heat, but 100% of the heat from the broiler will melt your probe. So don't use it when you're using the broil mode, okay? So roast mode, bake mode, really basic baseline modes, but I love them because they're so even and gentle and consistent when you're cooking with them. So one of the other modes, it's very specific, and you know, Chef Gil made us a beautiful pizza today using the stone mode. Now, stone mode is a unique mode for a Wolf oven because it is a mode that is engineered specifically for use with an accessory in place. In fact, only with an accessory in place. Now, it could be anybody's bake stone, but in the case of Wolf, we make our own bake stone just like this. It's beautiful because it is really heavy. And it's also reversible, which is kind of nice. So if you get tired of looking at one side, you can flip it over and look at the other, right? It's nice and heavy, nice and thick. It's almost 1.5 inches thick, right? So it's really going to be nice and dense. It's going to hold a lot of heat, right? So you can use anybody's bake stone in the stone mode. And the stone mode is actually engineered to preheat this unit, to preheat this stone, or any stone for that matter, so that there's a lot of thermal mass in the stone. So when you bake the pizza right on it, you get beautiful bottom crust. Let's show you how beautiful the bottom crust on this is. But look how even and beautiful that is from cooking on the stone. So it really is a great way to make a pizza. In fact, I'll tell you right now, there is no oven that bakes a pizza as well, other than just a straight pizza oven, than this stone will. So the stone mode, again, engineered for use with this stone exclusively, or like I said, any baking stone or baking steel. But it is designed to heat that stone, right, in such a way that you get all that 100% efficiency, the transfer up into the pizza that you're baking. And then the 40% from the broiler coming down is what melts and cooks the topping in about the exact same amount of time it takes to bake that beautiful crust. So if you're interested in getting a stone for your oven, right, you can order it from your local Roth Living showroom. Just give them a call. Tell them what oven you own and you'd like a stone for it. It comes with this handy rack for taking it in and out of the oven. It also comes with a peel like this, so you can easily take your pizzas on or off. And don't think that it's just for pizza, right? I mean, if you like to make pita bread, you like to make naan bread, you like to do all sorts of baking processes, you can use the stone to give that boost of energy. But remember, that mode is engineered to only be used with the stone in place. And the stone always goes in the very lowest rack position, number one, always. And it always goes into the oven when the oven is cold. And then you preheat the oven with the stone in place. The stone will slow the preheat process. It takes a little longer to preheat the oven, regardless of temperature, when the stone is in place, because it's absorbing a lot of that heat to use. But it is a fantastic way to cook. I would heartily encourage you get one. It's so much fun. Your kids will love it. Everybody will love it when you're using it. So stone mode, again, is a still mode, because even though sometimes we'll see the fans symbol turning, remember, a convection mode requires that those elements behind the back wall that surround the convection elements be active. They're not active. We're just moving air with the fans. We're not actually heating the air with those elements. So it's therefore not really a convection mode. It's actually a still mode because the air is just being heated and kind of gently moved about with the fans. Okay, there's our cookies that we baked off there as well. Okay, so that's the other two modes, much like dehydrate, you're not going to use them as often, right? Warm and proof. So we'll start with proof. Proof is obviously just for allowing yeasted doughs to rise in a warm and stable environment. Very limited temperature range in proof mode, only 85 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. All the heat is coming from the bottom of the oven. The other reminder about proof mode is you can't use the light, right? Because the light bulb heats up the oven higher than you might want for proving your dough. Ah, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Just a little bit more color. That's what we want. So proof mode, again, great for all those yeasted doughs that you would like to have rise in a very stable and warm environment. So use it for that, only that. That's the only thing you can use it for. The other mode is your warm setting. Obviously, all the ovens can become like a warming drawer, if you will. It has the warm setting. Goes from 140 degrees at the low end up to 200 degrees at the high end. And really, all you need to remember when you're using your warm setting is that if you're just trying to warm up your plates, your dishes, your bowls, whatever it might be, you only need 140 degrees. Don't put your plates in a 170-degree oven. That's too hot. You can't even pick them up at that point. Just let them go at 140, get nice and warm, so that when you serve something, it'll stay warmer at table for a little bit longer. If I have something that I just prepared, like these zucchini, and I wanted to keep them warm to serve them at a future time, I would want to set my oven at 160, right? Just 160 is a perfect temperature for holding food that was just prepared, came out of the oven, had a chance to rest. It's like my chicken. As long as my chicken has rested, right, I can pop it back in the oven at 160 and it's not going to keep cooking, right? It's going to stop cooking if I put it in at 160. And then if I have food that I want to reheat, right, that I made yesterday, but I'd like to reheat it without double cooking it, and I certainly don't want to reheat it in the microwave, I want to reheat it in my oven. I'm going to use the warm setting, and I'm going to use that at 200 degrees. And how I'll do that is I'll take the item that I'm wanting to rewarm, place it in its vessel, cover it with plastic wrap. I know, don't worry, it's not going to melt. Cover that plastic wrap with aluminum foil, slip the probe inside the whatever I'm warming into the very middle of it, through the wrap, through the foil, plug it in, warm 200, set my probe temperature at about 150. Because I'll tell you right now, if you put 150 degrees in your mouth, that's pretty hot. And you're not going to want to eat everything quite that hot. But 150 degrees at 200 and as my goal temperature and 200 as my oven temperature, I'm not double cooking my food. I'm not going to dry it out. I'm not going to ruin it, but I am going to get it nice and hot. Is it fast? No. But that's the point. We don't need it to be fast. We need it to be good. And that's why we want to use the warm setting for that, using our probe and that nice 200 degree setting to use the probe. All right. So broil, you saw me broil these zucchini, right? Broil is a little bit different than all the other modes. Instead of having a temperature associated with it, you have high, medium, low, or 3, 2, 1. 3 is always the hottest. If you have a dual fuel, it'll be listed as 3. If you have a wall oven, it'll be listed as high, right? High is the mode that we use when we are cooking protein, something from a raw state, like a chicken breast or maybe a small steak or a chop or something like that. We'd like to broil it. We want to cook on the hottest setting, 3, and we simply adjust our rack position based on the thickness of the item that we are cooking. So if we're cooking something that's 1 inch thick or thinner, right, we want to be cooking on 3 in rack positions 5 or 6, okay? So 5 or 6 for the thin cuts. If I have a thicker cut or thicker than 1 inch, I want to go 5, 4. Remembering that what we're trying to do is brown the outside while we're still allowing the middle to cook fully. And we need to move it down because if something is really thick, if we put it too close to the heat, it will brown too quickly without the middle having a chance to cook. So we want to make sure that we do that. So again, thinner, 5, 6, rack, heat setting 3, thicker, rack 5, 4, heat, and same heat setting 3. For things like the zucchini, or if I'm just trying to brown something, if I have a beautiful casserole that I want to finish the top on, or maybe crisp some breadcrumbs, then I only need to use a medium setting or even the low setting, because that lower temperature is not going to try to cook something. It's simply going to crisp it and embellish it, garnish it, whatever it might be. That's when you use the broil setting. Now remember, with broil as well, the oven door stays closed. You don't need to prop the oven door. It's not the old days anymore. We can close that oven door. I do recommend that if you are broiling something that's fatty, right? If you're doing a steak, if you're doing a little ribeye, something like that, and there could be smoke, turn on your ventilation system. Don't put it on high. Put it on before you put the oven on. Put it on before you put the food in the broiler, because you want to make sure that if there's any smoke coming out of your oven from that broiling process, that it goes up the flue and not to your smoke alarm, and then you have to fan that and kind of run around and do that. So just remember, broil, fan on if you're going to have a little bit of grease and a little bit of smoke, and door stays closed, right? You can preheat your broiler. Only takes about 4 minutes to preheat it, or you don't have to preheat it. It's really up to you, but I like to preheat it a little bit. So I give it like 4 or 5 minutes before I insert the food. Again, on your broiler tray, I like to put a little foil, just makes it a little bit cleaner, okay? So that gourmet setting that I talked about at the beginning, gourmet is a cool thing, because with gourmet, we can do a lot of really fun things. And let's just show gourmet how it works. Right here on this panel, we just touch the gourmet button, and then you have all these different categories, right? One dish meals, pizza, baked goods, fish, meat, vegetables. So if we did a vegetable, let's pick a vegetable. We just touch on vegetable, and now you have roasted vegetables, or you have a baked potato, you have a sweet potato. But I love this baked potato program, because I get questions all the time from people. It's like, what's the best way to bake a potato? Like there's some newfangled way to bake a potato. There really isn't. It's time consuming, but you want to get it right. Well, this is the best way to get it right. So if I want to do a baked potato in my Wolf using gourmet, I just touch baked potato, and that just reviews it for me and says, oh, you want to do a vegetable and you want to do a baked potato? Yeah, I do. So done. So here's the on-screen instructions, and it says no preheat required. No preheat. You're not going to have to. It's always going to tell you that, whether or not you need to preheat or not. Then it's going to say which rack position is the ideal rack position for this actual process. Then it's going to give you a probe, and in this one, look at that, it says probe position in the center of the potato. So what I always do is I get the largest potato that I'm baking, and I take my probe and I go to the end and I stick it in as far as I can. And that's really important to remember with your probe. Don't hang it out like that. Make sure it's all the way in. Whatever it is you're doing, make sure it's in, because if you leave it hanging out like this, the probe's going to read the oven first, not the inside of the potato. So you're going to have a very raw potato that the probe thinks is 195 degrees. So make sure whenever you use your probe that it's completely embedded in wherever it is you're cooking. So there's my probe position in the center of a potato, and then it tells you how it's going to cook it. It says it's going to bake the potato at 350 degrees until the probe temperature reaches 205. And I'll tell you right now that when you bake your potato to 205 degrees internal temperature, it's beautiful and light and fluffy, exactly the way a baked potato should be, right? So great way to do it. And all the gourmet modes do that. If they use the probe, it's going to cook to the probe time. Now you're thinking, or probe temperature, excuse me. But if you're thinking to yourself, well, how long am I going to know how it's going to cook? You aren't. You're only going to be able to watch the probe count up. What I'd recommend to you is to do this. If you're roasting something, you know, you're making a prime rib or something like that, and it's going to be cooking to a probe temperature, it's not going to cook for a certain amount of time. It's just going to cook till the probe is done. If you need to kind of be able to estimate the time, go on the internet and type in and say, how many minutes per pound for 10-pound prime rib? You'll get a number back. What I suggest that you do is pick the low end of that range and use that as your guideline. So you have a 10-pound prime rib, it's 14 minutes per pound, so that's 140 minutes, so it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. That would be my first estimate. I would always estimate on the low end, because I can always cook it more. I can't uncook it. So, but the probe will tell you. You'll watch that probe count up the temperature, so you can watch it do that. For your baked goods in the gourmet mode, right, what I recommend that you always do, because there's no way that the oven can approximate how long it's going to take your particular batch of cookies or type of bundt cake is going to take to bake. So use your recipe timing, right? Whatever the recipe said to bake it, then just put that into your timer function, and that'll help you gauge if that's enough time to bake that item, right? Because the oven can't know in the gourmet setting how long it's going to take to bake your cake versus my cake versus Chef Gill's cake for anybody else's cake. It's not going to know. It's just going to have to, it's just going to bake it. So again, once you've reviewed all this, you get everything set up, you just hit start and the oven just takes off and cooks it for you. So the gourmet feature is a lot of fun. I recommend that you play with it. It's a great way to get to know your oven a little bit so you understand a little bit of how it, well, for lack of a better term, thinks, right? How it's programmed to operate, and you'll get a sense of, oh, that used the roast mode and I got a really nice top, color on this or that or whatever it might be. So that's why we want to use the gourmet mode. Last mode, not a cooking mode, right? That is the clean mode, your self-cleaning cycle. Do not be afraid to use your self-cleaning cycle. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, I was told never to use my self-cleaning cycle. I'm going to kill my oven. It's going to ruin it. Well, if you use it once a week, yes, that answer is true. If I ran my cleaning cycle once a week, I would probably eventually kill my oven because it's 750 to 800 degrees for 4 hours. That's a long time. That's not good if you do it repeatedly. But what the factory has told us, what the engineers of the factory have told us, is that as long as you are using your self-cleaning cycle in a responsible manner, which means up to 5 times a year, and I don't know anybody who cleans their oven more than a couple times a year using the cycle, right? Then you're going to be fine. Remember that if you're using the self-cleaning cycle, everything comes out of the oven. All the racks, the side racks included, very easily removed. Just lift them up. They're on little screws. You just pick them up and take them out. No problem. Very easily removed. Once they're out, go ahead and close the oven door, touch the clean cycle, hit start. It will clean itself, right? 4 hours, scrub it clean. You don't have to wipe it out at the beginning. You don't have to do anything like that. Just it'll clean it really nicely. Remember this as well. If you didn't have the dirtiest oven in America and you ran the cleaning cycle, for a couple of hours and you think, you know what, that's probably enough. Just come over and turn it off. It'll stop the cleaning cycle. You don't have to wait for it to finish. You can turn it off by just hitting oven off, right? And it'll turn it off. So you can do that with the self-cleaning cycle. It's a very easy decision for me when to clean the oven. I look inside my oven, and when the back wall of the oven is a different color than the rest of the oven, in other words, if this is all blue and that's black, then I run the cleaning cycle. I'm not crawling in the back of the oven to clean it right by hand, right? I'm going to use my cleaning cycle for that. Again, if you're cleaning your oven in the months between May and probably early October, wow, that's a lot of heat in your kitchen. So I don't think we're going to clean our oven that often. I think really we do it maybe a couple times a year, more than great, because it's not just a little bit of grease and dirt on the outside of your oven. It's not impacting the way the oven performs. It's really just your comfort level with how the oven looks. So speaking of that, when we talk about cleaning the oven in between those self-cleaning cycles, we have some products that we really like to recommend. All of these products are safe. They will not scratch. They will not mar the internal surfaces of your oven. If you have some quick stains that just fall on the oven floor, you catch it, little pile, little lasagna sauce blurp on the bottom of the floor, and you catch it quickly, the Barkeeper's Friend and any one of these applicators, whether it be a Scrub Daddy or maybe it's a blue or pink Scotch-Brite, remember, do not use the green Scotch-Brites on your Sub-Zero, Wolf, and Cove appliances because you will scratch the stainless, right? So don't use the green, just use the blue or the pink. You can also use a magic eraser. It's especially effective when paired with a good degreasing solution. The magic eraser will do great things for cleaning your oven. All of these items with the Barkeeper's Friend, perfectly safe on any of those interior surfaces in addition to the stainless. One of the other products that we've discussed, and remember I said we're not in this for anything other than the fact that they work. This stuff is also made by the people who make the Scrub Daddy. It's called Power Paste. It's an all-natural product. It's a lemon oil-based product. Cleans remarkably well, really, really hard baked on stains. So it's a complete kit. It comes with its own scrubber inside, right? So you can use either a more abrasive side or a softer side, but it's great on really cooked on grease and food stains on all the surfaces. Again, will not scratch. So this is a great way to get that stain off the floor of your oven, catch it with this, and it'll just scrub it right off really, really easily, okay? If you need to clean the interior oven glass with your oven, I like to use a razor blade, a paint scraper. Very easily done by simply putting a light paste of Barkeeper's Friend with water on the cold interior glass of the oven. Once I've spread that paste around, I simply take my scraper and go in a horizontal direction all the way across until it's completely scraped. Then I go in a vertical direction, scraping upwards. I create a right angle of collected dirt and debris, wipe it away with a wet, clean cloth. And then if I want to really polish it up, I just get some ammonia-free glass cleaner, give it a quick spray with a microfiber, wipe it down, looks fantastic. So that's a great way to clean that interior oven glass. If you don't want to do what I like to call the manual method, you can use the whole magic eraser and degreasing solution. Works really well on the interior of your oven glass. Again, making sure that oven glass is cold. Don't do it when it's hot, all right? For your racks, your oven racks, hardest thing in your oven to clean are your oven racks. Go out and get yourself some of this stuff, Carbona 2-in-1 Oven and Grill Rack Cleaner. It's a kit. The instructions are on it, but what you'll simply do is place your racks, all of them together, in the included bag, or if they don't fit in the bag, and those of you who own an M series or a dual fuel, they won't fit. Get yourself a big, heavy contractor bag at the home improvement store. Put the racks in it. Dump the contents of the bottle in the bag. Get a partner. Steal the bag. The two of you just take it and just turn it a few times to coat all the racks really well with the solution. Lay it flat overnight. Next morning, take it to the sink. Give it a spray with the faucet sprayer and a nylon bristle brush. All the grease and all the stains are gone right down the sink. Super easy to use. So I would recommend that for cleaning your oven racks. And also remember, just once a year, you don't have to do this very often. It's not going to hurt the way that it's not going to affect the way they perform. And last, and certainly not least, for cleaning the exteriors, because there's nothing worse than fingerprints on your stainless, on your touchscreens, on your glass, on all of your appliances. We really love this Lemon Pledge Enhancing Polish. Make sure it says enhancing on it. Take a microfiber cloth, spray the cloth, not the appliance. Then take this and you can literally wipe steel, glass, touchscreens, the whole shooting match with no residue, no streaking, no nothing. And it's beautifully clean, and it smells of lemons. And how bad could that be in your kitchen? So again, we love this product. It's great on all the finishes in your kitchen, perfectly safe, so much easier than using two different products. All right, I'm just ran past my time. Everybody's like, get him off the TV. But really, thank you so much for joining us. I'm hoping that you'll take some more time to visit either our YouTube channel, or you're looking forward to the full introduction of the Culinary Scene, which you should definitely be looking forward to in the next 30 to 60 days of getting an invite for Culinary Scene. I think you're going to find it a huge benefit for all of you who own Sub-Zero, Wolf, and Cove appliances. So again, I appreciate your time, your patience, your questions. Again, reach out if you have any other questions, and we look forward to seeing you here at the Culinary Scene Kitchen very, very soon. Thanks, and have a great evening.